Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have my good brother here in the temple, coming to us from Distorted Illumination, taking weekly break from his tribunal to come here to discuss some cyberpunk. The one and only good brother Monarch. How are we doing tonight?
I didn't even realize we were going to be talking about anything cyberpunk because I had no time to look over anything remotely related to the Gaia complex.
I do recall that I gave you a bit of the skinny early on, and this is handled by someone who we are somewhat familiar with. Somewhat in your case. I am very familiar with the person involved in this case.
Who was it again involved with it?
Shep.
I don't know if I've actually talked to Shep yet.
You haven't talked to him, but you and I have covered something he worked on.
Huh.
The Conan Hyborian Age quick start.
I remember that one being pretty good.
Yeah. And when I found out he was working on it, that's why I set up that interview. I thought I was gonna have to go through some hurdles because Monolith is a French company, but nope. I just had one person who couldn't make it at the last minute, but that's par for the course. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I will note the Gaia complex is Shep's direct work, not to be confused with some of the other stuff that he's been involved in, like Slay Industries or Conan the Hyborian Age, where he was one of the designers, but it wasn't solely coming from him. Now, this technically is the first cyberpunk TTRPG that I have covered in the Valley of the Judge series with either Monarch or with Xanatrix. We've gotten close a couple times with stuff like Veil of the Void, which has some elements of it, namely with cybernetics, but I would not consider those games to be outright cyberpunk. Now, I know one of the obvious questions to be asked would be what separates the Gaia complex from the likes of something like Cyberpunk or Shadowrun. Obviously, there's no magic, so that separates it from Shadowrun easily. The Gaia complex is a much more European take on Cyberpunk. It's not taking place in Seattle or in the Bay or in a far future Bay Area. It is instead taking place in a mega complex within Western Europe. One that I would say is somewhat analogous to, say, Mega City 1 in Judge Dredd. The other thing to note, you know how for years I've had the running gag about the lonely D12 and running D12 and Forever GM support groups?
Yeah.
This game uses D12s as its primary mechanic.
I mean, that just makes me happy.
Because I've said it many times and I'll say it again, the D12 is probably one of the most disrespected die of all of the polyhedrals. And before anyone brings up the D100, that doesn't count. I'm not letting you bring a golf ball to the table. If you want to handle a golf ball, go to the driving range like everybody else. But I will note that there's going to be even though this book is about 9 shy of 300 pages, we're going to be doing a fair bit of skimming because much like Shadowrun and to a certain extent World of Darkness, there are some mini stories between the chapters. And the big reason we won't be covering those is because there's not a whole lot to really dissect. They're nice, they help set the tone, but it's not something that we can really focus on. And the first chapter that we're going to be going into is known as Going Merc, which I'd say is this setting's equivalent to chipping in Cyberpunk 2077.
I will say it's not often we've come across a book that leads with the character sheet this early.
Oh yeah. Now, fortunately, character sheets are available as a separate PDF, and they are available in the back. But this is certainly an unusual move. If the character sheet wasn't in a separate thing that you could print out, I would have called foul on this. I have had games in the past that have the character sheet in the middle of the damn book.
That'd have to be annoying to make print or just print. At least if you have a hard copy.
certain. It's certainly annoying for me. Certainly annoying for me, just on a purely aesthetic level.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know how I feel about it being here,
and
but I don't have a problem with it. I don't think.
well,
Anyway.
let me double check something so I'm not talking out of my ass. Okay, we have an index and we have the character sheet in the back. So
Alrighty then.
we have a character sheet, we have bookmarks, all the hallmarks that I bitch about constantly are present here. But going into it, the first thing that we're going to be delving into is character creation, which is also unusual for us because usually we have a bit of a preamble before we get right into character creation. In this particular case, because of how it's set up, we're going straight into that. So I will open us up. So give me a moment to zoom in a little bit. I do love the art, by the way.
It is a very nice looking book.
Mm-hmm. Every player needs a character, their own Merc with which to take on the streets of New Europe and tackle the corporate underworld of 2119. The following chapter explains the 8-step process for creating a character, allowing players to take a blank character sheet, shown opposite and included at the end of this book, and generate a street-ready personality in no time. Before getting stuck into character creation, players should discuss between themselves what kind of narrative they want for the team. As the characters have to work together, it is often good to have a backstory, at the very least settle on a suitable balance. While 5 operators can be a force to be reckoned with, maybe a former corporate hit squad or jaded ex-police officers from the same station, it is important for the players to ask themselves just how balanced that team will be. What if the GM puts them on a job that leaves the gun behind, involves hacking, or the subtle use of persuasion? Will they have the skills to get by? Generally, the very best Merc teams are those with a contrast of characters. If a combat-focused team is where the players want to go, it might be a good suggestion to have a dedicated paramed or mil tech in the team to offer support. A hacker may need some physical backup while they're stuck in the core, and maybe some technical support to max out the impact of their programs. Similarly, while a mech is adept at boosting cars, maybe a tech trader in the team can use their contacts to sell the vehicles on and make some real cash out of the deal. Putting in the time as a group to create a dynamic team of characters with well-connected backstories is a great way to sell the vibe for playing the Gaia complex. I am glad that this is brought up early on because it does bring up a trap that can happen with some games, where everybody ends up playing too similar to each other. Or you have two people who dip into the same role because they made their characters in isolation. This is why Session 0 has become a thing in the discourse. But
It's not something I think is necessary, but I'll give him props. I like having it here regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for people who are just maybe this is their first time grabbing it. It happens to be Gaia Complex. It's nice to note.
Mm-hmm. But then,
then we get
to species, and I'll let you take that.
So, by default, all characters are considered human. However, any player may choose to create a feral character instead. As ferals differ from humans in a number of ways, when creating a feral character, the following limitations and bonuses are applied. Brawn and brains are limited to a maximum of rank 5 during character creation. Allure and perception start at rank 2, which is stacked with a bonus from favored stats. Meld is an ability inherent to all ferals, which allows them to implant their own consciousness into an animal. To enable this ability, a feral character is required to take the meld skill. And feral characters gain an additional 6E and 6P hit points. I'll say I'm not sure what E and P are right now.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah. So all other aspects of the character creation process remain the same, regardless of which species is chosen. More background and information on ferals can be found in the feral culture chapter. Then we get character role. Each character must select a role. A character's role determines their style, job, attitude, and default characteristics from which a player can develop their personality. A role separates the former military hard case from the back alley cyberdoc or dedicated core hacker. Each type of role provides the starting character with a number of initial bonuses and rules as follows. A number of favored stats, which a character immediately gains 4 ranks in. A number of core skills, which are immediately gained by the character. Unlike stats, skills do not have a rank. A character is either skilled or unskilled. A starting item, which the character is free to start with. And a trait, which grants that role with a bonus in certain situations. So unless the GM rules otherwise, a player is free to select any role they choose from the following pages. Though a feral character may choose from any of the roles, only ferals may select the handler role. Humans can never take this.
Mm-hmm. And then we get the different roles that are available. First one being operators, which I would say is analogous to deckers or netrunners, as if the appearance wasn't a dead giveaway. But favorite stats are brawn, guts, and reflexes. Their core skills are firearms, melee weapons, strategy, and tracking. Starting item is 1 firearm plus ammo or melee weapon costing no more than 500 NEC, or a 500 NEC discount on a firearm or melee weapon during starting equipment. And their trait is combat readiness. Operators are trained combatants, able to identify threats and respond to them faster than other mercs. The character applies an additional +1 to their initiative at the start of combat. And actually, no, I take it back. Operator is more of the frontline commander.
Yeah.
The next one is more akin to the hacker, and that is core hackers. Core hackers have a favorite stats of brains, guts, and reflexes. Core skills are awareness, electronics, hacking, and programming. Starting items is up to 2 programs with a total cost of no more than 500 NEC. Trait is digital life. Core hackers have dedicated themselves to understanding the complexities of the core, often spending more of their lives inside the network than outside of it. The character may spend 1 grit to reroll any die that rolls a 12 during any hacking skill test related to the core. Only 1 die can be rerolled in this way per skill test. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Instead of rolling high, you're rolling low for this.
I mean, I think it's less of what we forgot to mention is I think the core rules are going to be next week.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't gotten to the actual rolling mechanics.
Yeah, but it's D12, you're trying to aim under your stat.
Yeah, next up, though, we've got the biohacker.
Mm-hmm.
I'll read just the first paragraph just so I can see what the difference between this and your typical hacker is.
Yep.
Biohacking is a recent addition to the Merc arsenal, with the first range of relevant software being reportedly developed by Gaia for the purpose of police interrogation, but later stolen from an unsecured databank and released in the black market, where it was duplicated, modified, and reworked. Alright. So I'm not exactly sure what a biohacker actually is, based off that.
They, well, I would say that they're somebody who directly hacks into somebody's body rather than just messing around with the network.
I would guess that based off the name and a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
So there's somebody who directly jacks into your head and steals info there.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. But yeah, the favorite stats being allure, brain, and guts. Core skills: deceive, hacking, persuasion, and programming. Starting items: up to 2 programs that cost no more than 500 NEC. And trait: mindjack. Biohackers have concentrated their hacking skills to perfect the art of biohacking. Once per game, the character may auto-pass a single hacking or persuasion skill test in relation to biohacking, regardless of the difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
I'm slightly questioning what the definition of game here is in context of this.
I'm assuming session. But then we have the Paramed. So you're equivalent to, say, Ripper Docks or Dock Wagons. They are the person who's going to be keeping you alive, whether you like it or not. Favorite stats are brains, guts, and perception. Core skills are athletics, awareness, drive, and medical. Starting item is any number of items from the medical equipment list with a total cost of no more than 500 NEC. Trait is caregiver. Parameds are experts in delivering medical aid and getting the absolute most out of their equipment. Each time the character delivers medical aid, the subject recovers 1 additional point of E, as well as 1 additional point of morale. Then we have the Cyberdoc, who I'd say is exactly what it sounds like. They're the person who is going to turn your meat parts into metal parts. Once again, whether you like it or not. Favorite stats are allure, brains, and perception. Core skills are electronics, medical, programming, and streetwise. Starting item is 1 piece of cybernetics costing no more than 500 NEC. Trait is tinkerer. Cyberdocs are inherent tinkerers, constantly building and modifying their own brand of hackjob cybernetics. Once per game, the character may auto-pass any single skill test in relation to the installation or repair of cybernetics, regardless of the difficulty. Then next we have Miltech, who I guess I would compare to like the weapon specialist or even Street Sams. Or because of the fact that they use drones, probably drone riggers. Favorite stats are brains, perception, and reflexes. Core skills are electronics, lockpick, pilot drone, and weapons tech. Starting items are any number of items from the tools and gear equipment list with a total cost of no more than 500 NEC. Trait is career technician. Miltechs know weapons and tech better than anyone. The character applies a modifier of -1 to all electronics and weapon tech skill tests in relation to making repairs. I think the intent is -1 to the D12.
Yeah. Yeah, next up we got Mech.
Mm-hmm.
Which, let's see. Yeah, these are your guys. Drive.
These are your solo.
Pilot aircraft. Ride motorcycle as their core skills.
Yep, these are your wheelmen.
Yeah. For favorite stats, brawn, brains, perception. Starting items. Any number of items from the tool and gear equipment list with a total cost of no more than 500 NEC. And their trait, Grease Monkey. They're expert drivers, pilots, and mechanics. Most at home around cars, bikes, or airborne deployment crafts. Character may spend 1 grit to reroll any die that rolls a 12 during any skill test related to driving, riding, piloting, or repairing vehicles. Only 1 die may be rerolled in this way per skill test.
Yep.
And we got the tech traders. Favored stats, lure, guts, reflexes. Core skills, barter, firearms, gambling, streetwise. So it looks like they might, to a degree, act as one of the faces of the party.
I'd say they're the equivalent of a fence or a fixer.
Yeah. Starting item, 100 neck worth of
Not 100, 1,000.
saleable goods, or 1,000 neck worth of saleable goods. And trait Street King. Tech traders are lords of the black market and better connected to New Europe's underworld than anyone else. Character applies a -1 modifier to all streetwise and barter skill tests in relation to locating items, buyers, and negotiating prices.
See, then we have Data Dealer, which is self-explanatory. Favorite stats are Allure, Guts, and Perception. Core skills are Barter, Deceive, Streetwise, and Surveillance. Starting items is 1,000 network of valuable information. The exact nature of this information is to be discussed with the GM. And their trait is Know Your Enemy. Data dealers are lords of information and understand that power is held in knowledge, particularly when that information is in relation to corps or those in a position of authority. The character may spend 2 grit to auto-pass any surveillance or deceive skill test, regardless of the difficulty. Let's see, and the last one is Handler. Yep.
And this is what was talked about earlier. You can't be a handler and a human. This is the feral something.
Job.
Maybe it's just ferals. Yeah, it just refers to them as ferals.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, their stats are Allure, Perception, core skills of Animal Handling, Awareness, Meld, and Tracking. Starting items, 1 animal costing no more than 500 neck or a 500 neck discount on an animal during Step 7 starting equipment. And trait, Feral Mind. Handlers have dedicated themselves to honing their mind and senses. The character may spend 1 grit to auto-pass any meld skill test, regardless of its difficulty. In addition, the character applies a -1 modifier to all awareness skill tests.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how they actually work, I imagine, once we get into what meld is, that'll tell us a lot more of what to expect out of a handler.
Yeah. The basics is that they can kind of mentally possess animals. You know, use them to act as their eyes and ears. But it's more like they're projecting their mind into that of an animal to remote control. But then we have the next step, which is stats. These are the core stats, which have a rank of 1 to 10, with ranks 4 through 6 being the human average. The core stats ascended before are Brawn, Reflexes, Guts, Brains, Allure, Perception, and Grit.
All of which pretty self-explanatory.
The exception to this is Grit, which is kind of your extra effort pool. This is the equivalent of Edge in Shadowrun, or Moxie in Eclipse Phase, or Willpower in World of Darkness. Saying, unlike other stats, Grit represents a pool of available points that can be spent during a game session in a number of ways to enable success in the face of almost certain defeat. And then then we get to your starting stats. So first off, you have your favorite stats. You automatically have 4 ranks in those. Everything else starts at 1. You then have 25 points to spend on increasing your stats, with a couple limitations. 1, no more than 1 stat can be at rank 9. You cannot start with any stat at rank 10. Pharaoh characters, as mentioned before, cannot have a Brawn or Brains higher than 5. And truth be told, putting something at rank 9, given the amount of stats that you have to be balancing, I don't think would be a good idea anyways. But
I could see making it work quite well, just because you do have some that start at 4. And it's not like you have a scaling cost to the higher numbers. It just seems like a straight 1-to-1.
Yeah. Then we have skills, which, again, what skills are is self-explanatory. All of the skills are tied to at least one of these 6 primary stats. Grit doesn't get any associated skills. And unlike some, this isn't a case of you putting points into skills and then putting points into attributes. No, you either have a skill or you don't. Skills marked with A are considered to be advanced skills, which you can't roll unskilled. And as it says here, unlike stats, skills do not have ranks. Instead, a character either possesses a skill and is skilled in that area, or does not possess the skill and is considered unskilled. But then we have a set of skills for each one. So for Brawn, we have climbing, heavy weapons, lifting, swimming, which is considered advanced. Mostly because there's not a whole lot of open water within a vast metropolis. Throwing and unarmed combat. For reflexes, we have athletics, firearms, melee weapons, pilot drone, ride motorcycle, and stealth. For guts, we have gambling, interrogate, intimidate, streetwise, strategy, and tracking. For brains, we have hacking, electronics, mechanical, medical, programming, and weapons tech. And for allure, we have animal handling, barter, deceive, leadership, persuasion, and seduction. And for perception, we have awareness, drive, lockpick, meld, pilot aircraft, and surveillance. Since meld is a bit unique here, I will read out that one. Meld, which is an advanced skill, is the skill related to the feral discipline of meld, whereby the feral is able to implant their consciousness into that of a partnered animal. The meld skill also gives ferals an insight to the state of mind of any animal they come into contact with. The meld skill is exclusive to and must be taken by all ferals. So, like I said, you're kind of possessing an animal. Now you have core skills from your particular role, as mentioned before, and all starting characters get 12 skills to pick from, with not a couple catches, 3 catches. 1, you cannot possess more skills related to a given stat than the rank you have in that stat. For example, a character with brains at 3 cannot pick more than 3 brains-related skills. A starting character may not possess more than 8 advanced skills. This is for starting characters and is removed after character creation, and as mentioned before, feral characters must take meld. Once you've chosen your 16 skills, you have to choose 2 of them to become specializations. These are ones that are underlined on the sheet. And then next we have disconnect, which is a measure of how human you are. A character's disconnect is reduced each time you add additional piece of cybernetics to your body, bit by bit, making you less human. As a character's disconnect gets lower, they may start to struggle with social interaction and suffer a noticeable lack of interest in the world around them. The effects of low disconnect are discussed later. All starting characters begin with a disconnect based on their species. Human starts with 80 plus twice your allure. Feral, it's 50 plus twice your allure. Disconnect can never be increased, but can be reduced during the character creation process if any cybernetics are purchased during step 7. Then we get to hit points, and this is where the whole E and P is answered. So you have 2 types of hit points. Endurance, or E, is your physical health. Pressure, or P, is your mental health. Essentially your stress threshold. So your maximum endurance is equal to 3 times your brawn stat at a minimum value of 6. If you're a feral, you add an additional 5 to this. Pressure is equal to 3 times your brain stat, minimum value of 6. Feral characters add 5 to this value. And there's a specialized version of pressure known as morale, which is used during combat and represents the stress brought out by explosions, bullets, and the reality that a character could die. Your morale is equal to twice your guts stat.
Then we move on to starting equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So, a merc doesn't walk into paid work with bare fists and harsh language. They're well equipped, armed, and prepared for the rigors of a criminal lifestyle. Each character role comes with a starting item, which can be selected as per the criteria listed on the relevant role. In addition, each character is also considered to have 3 sets of casual clothing, 1 set of either steel or tactical clothing, a shared or small apartment in one of the less desirable parts of New Europe, and enough food to last a week. In addition, each character starts with 3,500 NEC worth of items from the Gear and Tech chapter. Characters are free to spend this money in whatever way they see fit, though no money is saved from this process. Spend it or lose it. All equipment should be recorded on the player's character sheet. After weapon and equipment purchases have been chosen, a character receives a further 250 NEC in cash to begin the first game session with. 250 NEC is barely enough to keep a roof over your head for a month, so it's time to go out and find some work.
Mm-hmm.
And then finishing touches. The final part of creation involves injecting some actual character into your character. A player should feel free to go as deep as they feel comfortable, but as a minimum, the following points will help you add some life to your merc. Your name, sex, gender, and all that, what they look like, motivations, secrets, etc., backstory stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that pretty much wraps up character creation.
And I'd say so far we have a decent setup. I will note that there's a couple things it's doing that I appreciate. One is the fact that some cyberpunk games have a bad habit of just throwing you into the middle of the pool. You know, just giving you a set number of points and saying, figure it out.
This, you pick a role, like, you have a lot of stuff you're picking beyond that, but you get to at least pick that first core aspect of what it is your character does.
Yeah.
And then you're building around that.
Yeah, and I know some people will have said that classes in the traditional sense are too limiting. This is a more archetype approach, which I find to be a nice middle ground. You know, you have a direction that you can lean into and veer off if you need to, but you're not being completely thrown into the middle of the pool and being told swim. I know some might find the lower disconnect for ferals to be a bit odd, but it makes sense since within the text for Handler, there's a lot of implication that ferals try to eschew as much cybernetics as possible. Having a lack of cybernetics is what allows them to hone their particular talents. So it would make sense that they have a lower threshold in exchange for the gifts that they do get. Namely, the fact that they're going to be able to take more of a beating than others because of that additional 5.
No, I am interested in seeing more about how those ferals are actually going to operate. Because that feels a little out of place compared to what one might see in other cyberpunk.
I'm fine
So
with
it's
it.
got my interest.
Yeah, I'm fine with it here because, well, it's gonna be a way to stand out. Aside from that, one other bad habit when it comes to a lot of cyberpunk games is drowning me in skills. In skills and sub skills and specializations and the like. Whereas here it's you're either skilled in this thing or you're not. Full stop. And that makes it significantly easier to figure out what the spread of skills is going to be. Because the problem that can happen when you have a skill point setup is it can almost disincentivize picking up new skills as you go further, just because of how much of an investment you'd have to put in order to make it catch up with the other skills you have.
Yeah.
It's for that reason I prefer like the skill training approach in, say, Star Wars Saga Edition over skill points as in something like D&D or Pathfinder. Or just
yeah.
If you're going to do that sort of skill points, I think there's a better way than giving you a set number of points and then being thrown right at the wolves. Like, here's 45 points worth of skills. Figure it out.
My issue with it was always it kind of just did get to that point where it's like you're not really benefiting from like a long running game with your skills unless you're maxing them out all the time anyway. So it just feels like you're adding an extra step at that point, making me reinvest the points.
Not to mention that doesn't really fit how people learn things.
Yeah. See, and I don't really mind it if they would just do that for like the Pathfinder stuff. Is just pick the skills at first, and those are your skills now.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe just have an alternate way to pick some up from certain class features later. But
Second edition,
the points are just extra steps that don't need it.
Yeah, second edition actually addressed that with how skills are tied to the proficiency tiers that so much of it is built around. And your level of proficiency is going to determine how you progress with those skills. I'm vastly simplifying, but the point is that there is a way to do it. Plus, it avoids the unfortunate problem that can happen where you have some characters who cannot be skilled in things that they should be. Like, imagine you're playing a fighter who is, say, a soldier. A soldier is going to have some degree of training in more than just swinging their weapon.
Yeah, the class that's going to most likely be the town guard doesn't have a natural proficiency in notice. Something you would, I don't know, think they would have, as their job is to notice things.
Or suppose your character is supposed to be a knight, and then you have to get into all the bullshit with knowledge skills, which I've bitched about that for years.
Just needs some condensing, that's all. Fucking 9+ knowledge skills, why?
And don't think you're safe either.
To be fair, the problem there isn't the skill itself, it's time.
I could say it's a little of column A and a little of column B.
Oh. Yeah. Condense crafting more, and I don't know, maybe let players actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
Give them time to actually be able to craft.
Uh,
As a DM, you have to make a lot of exceptions to let crafting work. But I digress.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, well set up, easy to follow. I like the character creation bit.
I think the only thing I might add
A lot more simple than I'm used to from Cyberpunk.
I think the only thing I might add, and this is something I'd probably just write out as a cheat sheet if I'm running Gaia Complex, is like a one page summary, like those cheat sheet entries you'd see at the back end of the character creation chapter in a lot of World of Darkness books. Well, a lot of World of Darkness core books. Let me clarify. You also saw it in Cthulhu Tech, which I've covered plenty of times in the past. But some sort of quick reference for that sort of thing that has the full skill list and the like, even if it's as well as all the formulas, not in detail with each one, but just something that you can quickly reference for getting the players up to speed with character creation.
Yeah.
But again, that's something that can be written out fairly easily. Now, I kind of hinted at it before, but next week we'll be getting into the rules proper. And as mentioned, this is going to be using D12s in a roll low kind of way. Which I've never understood why some people turn up their nose at the idea of aiming low. Since there's plenty of real world kind of games that you'd want to do that, or do something like blackjack where you're trying to aim under something but get as close to the line as possible. And I think it's just the monkey brain always looks at number go up. But in addition to going into the rules, we'll be going into some of the other aspects on how the system works. But I'm just glad that I get to cover something with a D12 setup.
Yeah.
Because it's aim low, even if you were to cap out at 10 with a given stat, that doesn't mean a guaranteed win, because you could still roll an 11 or a 12 and fail.
And from what I'm seeing, without taking into account what Grit might be able to do, the plus or minus one to certain things, effectively a 12 is always going to be a fail.
Mm-hmm.
Barring circumstances we may not have gotten to yet.
Yeah, so for you math nerds, that means that you do have a 8.3 repeating chance of failure, which is actually higher than a D20 chance. Because D20 is a flat 5. I could see some people getting tripped up over the plus 1 minus 1 number. That is a number that is modifying the die itself, not what you're going to be rolling as the target number.
Effectively the same thing, but the math, I think, works out the same regardless of what way you do it.
Yeah, it's just you can present, as we should have learned decades ago with Thaco. You can have the math check out, but still present it terribly.
Yeah.
Like, Thaco in old D&D is not a... It makes sense once you understand how it's supposed to work, but by presenting in this double negative way and how it was written, it can throw people off.
Yeah. It's fundamentally not that much different from what they did in 3rd edition. It just read a little nicer in 3rd edition.
Well, with third, instead of playing this high-low regarding whether you're supposed to roll high or roll low with certain things, third edition just decided to unify and go, you're always rolling high.
That was a nice change, I think.
You know, as opposed to, okay, you're rolling low for certain skill checks if you're a thief. You're rolling high for damage. You're rolling low for you're rolling in this inverse way for armor class calculation. There are already alternate books that had ascending AC as it was. So it was just a case of just cutting out the middleman. Of course, then there was stupid things like at a certain level, if you're playing fighter, you get your attack rate it goes from 1 attack every round to 2 attacks every 3 rounds. But never going into the math on how that's supposed to work. Is it a case of alternating between 1 or 2? And I know somebody's going to point to
there are things I like about second edition, but God,
I know somebody will point out, oh, you're going between 1 and 2 attacks every round. I'm like, it doesn't say that. You need to be explicit with these kind of things. But that I think we'll wrap up for this particular episode. I know this was short, but in my defense, the first episode of every season usually ends up being on the short side.
Yeah.
So we'll be back with the rules next week, and of course tomorrow I will be continuing my look at the robotic age with Brother Xanatrix. And of course, this Saturday, tune in as we do our monthly one shot. This time around, covering New Edo, which is Neon Samurai, not Cyberpunk. Anyone who calls it a Cyberpunk game is wrong, and I hope they sit in their wrongness and continue to be wrong. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody!